Okay, we're settling down here in the Zendo spotlight. Relaxing demand. Let's see if I can get Karleen. Spotlight. Got the two spotlights. Okay, I think that's working right now. Welcome back, everyone. Online Sangha, can you hear us okay?
I can.
I think we're all settling in here. Let me pass it off to the two of you. If you'd be so kind, I will leave it to you for your own introductions this morning.
Great. Thank you very much, Kelly. And it's so wonderful to see all of you. It's interesting to get the in-person perspective. Let's see. It's interesting to get the in-person perspective here, or I'm usually in person, and just being online is I haven't really done this as much since the pandemic, so it's really it was cool to go in the breakout rooms and have that experience again. The title of our talk is Mindfulness, Meltdowns, and Mud. Oh my. And I'm Kathy Dahl. I live here in Oak Park with my husband and my two teenage kids, one of which is about to move into the college dorms next week. I started meditating and studying mindfulness about 17 years ago. I was pregnant with my second child. And my practice has been really, I think, transformative, just really an invaluable source of support for me on my journey as a parent and on my life journey as a human being. And especially since I found this wonderful community to meditate with a little over 5 years ago. I joined in 2020. And I work with Karleen on family programs at ZLMC, including Family Morning Zen, the Mindfulness for Parents group, and the course that we have coming up, which is called Mindfulness and the Art of Imperfect Parenting. We'll be co-teaching that in October. Looking forward to that. I've completed mindfulness teacher training with Roshi Robert Althouse here at the center, and I've also taught a bit formally and informally, taught courses to adults, high schoolers, college level courses, and middle schoolers. And I'm just really grateful and excited for the opportunity to share this talk with Karleen today. So thanks.
Hi, everyone. Just going to bring up the right screen that I need here. It's great to see you all, some whom I've met and some whom I haven't yet. My name is Karleen Manchanda, and my pronouns are she and her, and I'm really delighted to be here today with Kathy to share this talk. I live in Canada as a first-generation settler of Japanese ancestry, and I'm really grateful to be speaking to you from my home in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And Winnipeg is located on Treaty 1 territory, which is the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Inninewak, the Anishinaabe, and Dakota Oyate peoples, and it is also the homeland of the Red River Métis. And very grateful to be gathering on Zoom with those of you at the center in Oak Park, Illinois, which is situated on the ancestral lands of the Bodewa-Miadkewin, the Mianmia, Oseti-Sakowen, the Kikapoi, and Peoria peoples. And I take time to acknowledge these lands and these peoples so that the spirit of gratitude and the intention of shared responsibility for these lands may benefit all of our relationships. And just like Kathy, I've been part of the Zen Life Meditation and Center community since 2020. I began my mindfulness journey through yoga, actually, about 15 years ago. And this journey has really led me to a number of interesting discoveries and to numerous trainings in mindfulness, in meditation, in yoga, as well as in self-compassion. And this does include the training with Robert Roshi at ZLMC. Really, I think I've been a teacher both, formally and informally for most of my life, starting with teaching swimming lessons in high school. um, and my mothering career at this point spans over 2 decades. Oh my. My husband and I we're still learning to parent mindfully as our two kids navigate young adulthood in some very challenging times. And along with really rich adventures and deep, imperfect love, our family's story also includes adoption, depression, ADHD, and what I've come to like to think of as a few other mental health koans. And so mindfulness and meditation and really, the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha have truly both saved and enriched my life. And really, it's exactly because this thread of mindfulness has had such a transformative impact on our lives that about 2 years ago, Kathy and I, along with Junmei, Reverend Kelly Good, began to brainstorm ways to share what's been helpful to us with other parents, and to try to create a space through ZLMC for growing a community of parent practitioners. And with the support of a Lens Foundation grant, our 5-week course that Kathy mentioned, Mindfulness in the Art of Imperfect Parenting, was launched earlier this year. And so Kathy and I are really excited to be offering version 2.0 in just a few weeks through the month of October. And we're hoping today's talk gives people a flavor of our course. While it may have a little more of the Buddhist flavor because of the nature of the talk, our course certainly really integrates the science as well as experience, lived experience, and just really uses the teachings as a lens through which we can kind of reorient ourselves when we're dealing with the joys and challenges of parenthood. And we also hope that whether you're a parent or not, you're going to find something useful in what we have to share, because from our view, parenting, like Zen, is all about relationships. And much like the saying goes with the paramitas, when we practice one relationship, we're actually practicing with all relationships. And Norman Fisher, who's written a lovely book called Taking Our Places, The Buddhist Path to Truly Growing Up, he writes, yes, in Zen, we sit long hours on the meditation cushion, but Zen practice is communal, not solitary. Enlightenment is the fruit, not of isolation, but of connection. And Zen is the practice of compassionate and warm-hearted relationship. And so, we feel that the path of parenthood and the path of Zen, they're not separate paths, right? It's a path that's really kind of ripe with the joys and the challenges of communing with others and connecting with compassion. It's a practice of mindful, not perfect relationships with ourselves, with our loved ones, with our communities, and really with the world in which we're living. And so this is our invitation that we maybe walk the path together for the next little while. And perhaps as a, background soundtrack, you might be thinking of a little tune that kind of goes, "We're off to see the wizard, wonderful wizard of Oz." And with that, I'll hand it over back to Kathy.
Yes, there will be a little bit of Wizard of Oz in this talk. So, uh, I'm going to begin with talking a little bit about mud in the title. Again, our title is Mindfulness, Meltdowns, and Mud. Oh my! Um, Karleen will talk a little bit about meltdowns. I'll talk a little bit about mud. Um, I'll just start with a story that happened when my kids were much younger. We had just moved to a new town, and my daughter was starting a new preschool, and my son was an infant. He had been born prematurely, like 2 months, over 2 months prematurely, so quite early. And we had a lot of concern about germ exposure for him, particularly in that first year of life. And so I worked out something with the preschool teachers at my daughter's school where instead of me going in, because I always had my son in tow with me, and going into the preschool every day, potentially exposing him to more germs, they very kindly offered to bring my daughter to the door, the outside door of the preschool, where I would pick her up. And so, this worked out well, but not long into the beginning of this, there was one day where I went to pick up my daughter, and teacher brought her out up to the porch. I usually came on the early side of things because, before things started to get too crowded with other parents coming in. And this particular day, my daughter just did not want to go home. She refused. And I, was like, at first I was like, oh, come on, really? And she's like, no, I don't want to go. And, a little bit of back and forth ensued. And I started to get a little bit nervous because I knew that I wouldn't be able to bring both carry. If I needed to carry her, I couldn't really carry her and my son down this like long flight of stairs that I had to go down in order to bring her back to the car. And so I'm trying to reason with her, and she's now starting to cry and starting to scream. And I'm pulling everything I can think of out of my parent toolbox here, how about some M&Ms? And even though I didn't have any, I was like, I'll buy you some at the store. No, none of that was working. And, at this point, other parents are starting to come, and they're going in and out of the school, bringing their kids. And my daughter's getting progressively more and more upset. And I'm just kind of, I don't know what to do. I'm new there. I don't know anybody. And I'm, thinking, oh, what are these, I'm making a great impression on these parents, who are coming by, and, they were kind of in their distance trying to give me a little bit of space. And, finally I just stopped, and I, took a breath, and I looked around, and I could see, my daughter really needed help. I really needed help. Even though I was having some resistance to asking for it, I just locked eyes on the next parent that came up the stairs, and I said, "Hi, my name's Kathy. I'm new here. Would you mind helping me?" And of course, she said yes, and she carried my son down while I carried my daughter down to the car. And I started a new friendship with this parent that day, and it really helped me break the ice with that parent community. There were a lot of jokes about this afterwards. Yeah, oh yeah, you're the woman who was on the stairs with, screaming child. And I was like, yeah, that was me. And not long after that, the friend who had helped me out, I invited her over to our house for a play date after school with her kids. And, we had a very nice time. And then not long, before I guess the end of the play date happened, her 4-year-old got a little bit rambunctious and wild. And peed on our living room rug. And, my reaction was like, yes, thank God. I am not the only one. It was such a relief. I never thought that I would experience such joy at having pee on my floor. But, this is what happens sometimes when you have young children. And, so that's kind of an example of mud. Things were not going the way that I preferred. There was messiness. There was, this struggle with my daughter and with my own struggle with like embarrassment around the other parents and this feelings of this disconnection with the others around me. Um, when we talk about mud, the phrase "no mud, no lotus," that wonderful phrase coined by Thich Nhat Hanh comes to mind, and it's something that I say to myself like a mantra quite often, because it just brings me joy, or it brings me hope and comfort every time I hear it. Because a lot of the time, I really don't want that mud that comes up in my life. I mean, it's mud. And I struggle the same way that I was struggling with my daughter that day at pickup at the preschool, because I didn't want the difficulty. I wanted ease. I wanted to just be able to walk in like the other parents and pick up my daughter and have her walk to my car. I wanted something that was easier. And that's a pretty common reaction to difficulty and challenges and suffering. I think, to turn away, try to ignore it, resist it, maybe try to control or fix it. And this phrase, no mud, no lotus, is just it's a good reminder. It's an invitation to, take a look at the messiness and difficulty that we're experiencing in our lives, and to see that potential for growth, that potential for beauty, because that potential is always there. We just need to be able to see it. So, mud, it's a precious gift, because without the difficulty, without the challenges, all of that stuff that each of us have been through, we would not be the people who we are today. And, mud and difficulty can be really generative, like in surprising and creative ways. I know during the pandemic, we have neighbors who live across the street from us who are professional musicians. And a few days into lockdown, everybody on our block got this email. And in the headline, in all caps, was 8 p.m. tonight. And I opened up the email, and in the body, I was invited to a sing-along on my front porch at 8 o'clock that night. And the song was Old MacDonald Had a Farm. And so at 8 o'clock, my family, we all went out on our front porch and we looked, and all of our other neighbors were out on their front porches. And we sang Old MacDonald Had a Farm together. And we'd even gotten, they'd sent the lineup, first the horse, then the pig, then the cow, then the dog, I mean, it was great. And we then had sing-alongs like that every day for the next 74 days. And I mean, I know it really meant a lot to me, and I know it meant a lot to a number of neighbors on our street, especially those who lived alone, because for them, that was may have been the only in-person human contact they had that day for a number of days, perhaps months. And, as parents, for parents, we see how our child's struggles feed their growth. Whether it's when they're babies and we subject them to tummy time, which if you're not familiar, it's when you put a baby like on their stomach so that they can develop upper body strength. My kids hated it. I mean, they would get really fussy. But that was how they learned how to crawl. That was how they developed that. So, whether it's that or learning how to ride a bike, or struggling and learning from the consequences of their mistakes. Kids really benefit each time they make it through these struggles. And, so do we all, whether we're parents or whether we're not, we all benefit from challenges and getting through challenges. And, it teaches us how to do better the next time, how to adapt and be flexible. It teaches us empathy because we see others suffering, and we know what it's like because we've been there. So back to the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy, she encounters a bit of mud in that movie. But through the different challenges she encounters, she finds her Sangha. The Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion, friends that she can rely on and who she also supports. Um, Dorothy displays kindness, openness, empathy, and curiosity, even as she's moving through this very strange world with really some terrifying obstacles. I mean, the Wicked Witch of the West, she scared me. Every year that movie came on, watching it as a child, and the flying monkeys were just terrifying. Um, and, you know, Dorothy and her friends, Dorothy, she discovers her own self-resilience and gains some self-confidence with each difficulty that she and her friends move through. And most of all, she learns to appreciate her life. There are a number of lotuses that kind of emerge from the mud in this movie. And, it's also worth mentioning that it's not mud alone. Mud alone does not bring the lotus. Just because you have mud doesn't mean the lotus is happening. Other conditions for that lotus to grow, right? You need the right temperatures, you need sunshine, you need air. And in the same way, um, with our difficulties, mindfulness is kind of like that sunshine and air. It helps create the right conditions so that we can cultivate compassion, joy, connection, beauty. All of those things have those things spring forth from the messy circumstances in our lives. And, there are a number of ways that we can practice to transform our suffering to joy through mindfulness. Um, you know, Pausing is very helpful. We practice by pausing and just being with, whatever is happening in the present moment. Can I just be here right now in this situation, just as it is, without fixing it or turning away? Can I just be here on the porch with my daughter who's screaming? Can I bear witness to what is going on? And, for parents, that's very difficult. It's difficult for all of us to bear witness to difficulty, the struggles, our own internal struggles. And, for parents, it can be just downright painful to have to bear witness to the struggles that our children go through in life. But it's really important. There's so much growth that happens as a result of that. And, we can also approach difficulty with beginner's mind. That is, looking at the challenge with new eyes as if for the first time. We practice with kindness, noticing these thoughts that I'm having and asking, is this really so? Can I let go of my assumptions and judgments about the situation, about the people involved, and most of all, about myself? Can I accept and embrace how I am as a parent and as a person right now, in this very moment, warts and all? Can I see my kids? Can I see and love my kids for who they are right now, not necessarily how I wish they might be? Um, can I pause and notice what's happening in my body right now? Tap into that body wisdom and try to understand, what is it that I'm feeling right now, and what am I needing? And look at the others in the situation and understand, what are the feelings and needs for everyone involved. And really, by making this an intentional practice, where I can come back, because I will forget, and I do. Um, but then, being able to come back every time, again and again, and building that mindfulness muscle so that we can transform, our suffering, our difficulties into beautiful lotuses of joy and see things in a whole way. And with that, I will turn things over with Karleen. She will talk a little bit about meltdowns.
Okay. Thanks, Kathy. So we're going to ease on down the road, the yellow brick road, to talk a little bit about the concept of meltdowns. And although I'm working on an iPad, so I don't have like that lovely view where I can see what I'm reading as well as everyone in the screen. But I'm going to trust that you'll raise your hand if this applies to you. Just a show of hands if you have ever experienced a meltdown, either yours or I'm trusting that there's some hands up. I think yes. Okay. Yeah, so that the meltdowns are one of the imperfections that can challenge us, right, on our path. And when we hear this word meltdown, I think often what can come to mind first is children having a meltdown, a young child that's crying and screaming, maybe similar to how Kathy's daughter was, getting overwhelmed and crying, and maybe that child is crying and screaming when it's time to leave the playground or go to bed or have to leave school. A teenager that's yelling and cursing at their parents when they're reminded to do their homework before they go out with their friends. But I'm going to turn this a little bit and ask, but what about ourselves? Because aren't we all children, whether we live with our parents or not, right? And so even as adults, we can also have meltdowns. We just may use different language, right? Oh, he just snapped. She totally lost it. Or, yeah, they had a breakdown. And at any age, a meltdown could be described as a loss of control over our response to a situation. And usually it's because we're in some state of intense overwhelm. And Pema Chodron, the Buddhist teacher, has, a book title that really captures the essence of how this might feel. It's called When Things Fall Apart. And I'll be sharing a number of excerpts from that wonderful book. And in my own life, particularly as a parent, I have certainly had meltdowns when I have felt that things were falling apart. And I'd like to share something from writer Anne Lamott. And she says, no matter what happens to us, to our children, to our town, to our world, we feel it is still a gift to be human and to have a human life, as long as we ignore the commercials and advertisements and the static that the world beams at us, and understand that we and our children are going to get knocked around, sometimes so cruelly that it will take our breath away. And it's been these breathtaking moments that have brought me both literally and figuratively to my knees, to cry like a toddler or rage like a teenager. And I used to think, this is bad. This is shameful. What is wrong with me? I thought that the important question to answer was, how can I stop these meltdowns? And, Pema Chodron writes, when things fall apart and we're on the verge of we don't know what, the test for each of us is to stay on that brink and not concretize. And I have certainly found that life is a good teacher that offers you chances again and again to take and retake the test until I learned the lesson. Right? And at a certain point, I realized that a much more useful question to ask myself is, how do I relate to these meltdowns? Do I turn towards it or turn away? What does my body or my heart feel when I experience a meltdown? What judgments and assumptions am I making about this meltdown? And what are my beliefs about falling apart? And, I think this kind of curiosity is really important, because if my experiences in life have led me to believe that meltdowns are bad and shameful, then what kind of reaction will I have when my child or my loved one or even a stranger comes undone in my presence? And it turns out that the more I practice a non-judgmental, compassionate, holding a non-judgmental, compassionate space for myself, when I melt down and fall apart, the more capacity I start to have to bear witness when others fall apart. And the more I'm able to respond from a place of love instead of fear. Intimacy with ourselves invites more intimacy with others. Right? Tenderness with ourselves grows our tenderness with others. Forgiving ourselves opens the door to forgiving others. And caring for ourselves allows us to care for others. So just like the mud is good news for the lotus, we could consider that a meltdown is good news for awakening. A meltdown is kind of like an alarm clock going off, and it's signaling us to wake up and pay attention, to take care of what's in front of us. And Pema Chodron describes this meltdown opportunity in this way. She says, the only time we ever really know what's going on is when the rug's been pulled out and we can't find anywhere to land. We use these situations either to wake ourselves up or to put ourselves to sleep. Right now, in the very instant of groundlessness, is the seed of taking care of those who need our care and of discovering our goodness. So are we simply falling apart, or are we breaking open, to the whole of our experience? So rather than considering a meltdown to be bad news, we could simply recognize it as, urgent communication from what is living inside of ourselves, inside of our child or any other being. Is my child screaming and crying before bed just because they're defiant and overtired? Or do they need more connection to me after a day of being apart? Is my teen yelling and cursing because they're irresponsible and disrespectful? Or do they just need to express how stressful it is to spend their days at school avoiding being bullied or trying to adhere to spoken and unspoken rules of behavior? And am I freaking out when I discover that my child is struggling because I don't know how to solve the problem? Or do I need to really face my own discomfort and fears about accepting that I cannot prevent them from experiencing suffering? So how do we learn to recognize a meltdown as an opportunity to break open, like to shed some light on what's inside? And how do we resist our very human inclination to hit the snooze button and go back to sleep? How do we learn to stay on the brink that really imperfect, uncomfortable place of groundlessness, and what helps us to relate to the mud and the meltdowns in our lives more skillfully. And in his wonderful book, Awakening Together, Dharma teacher Larry Yang writes, our usual pattern of going through our lives is actually not to be aware of life unfolding as it happens. We are often not living the direct experience of life because we're always trying to change it. When there is minimal mindfulness, we are constantly acting on our desires for our life to be different than it actually is. Mindfulness allows us to get familiar with and get real with our life and the full range of our experience, not just the portions we enjoy. And so mindfulness then, it's that practice, right, of meeting our present experience moment by moment with less and less judgment and more kindness, of learning to hold our experience in a way that allows us to gently, ever so gently, see our own conditioned habits more and more clearly. So with this in mind, let's return to the land of Oz for a bit, where, Dorothy and her friends, they're sent to see the wizard because Dorothy wants to get home, the Scarecrow wants more brains, the Tin Man wants a heart, the lion wants more courage. They all want these wishes granted. So the critical part of the story is where Dorothy and her small and courageous Sangha have faced their fears and done what the wizard commanded them to do. He said, I'll grant your wishes, but you have to bring me the broomstick of the wicked witch. And so they defeat the witch. They have the broomstick as proof, and they go back to the wizard's palace with high hopes that now the great and powerful Oz will reward them by granting them their wishes. And so his response, with frightening smoke and a bellowing voice, the Wizard of Oz refuses to grant their wishes right away. He tells them, come back tomorrow. And, as the friends protest and seem on the verge of a meltdown themselves out of desperation, it's Dorothy's dog, her beloved dog, Toto, who notices that there is something happening behind a curtain. And Toto grabs that curtain in his jaws and pulls the curtain open. And with the curtain wide open, we see clearly that the great and powerful wizard is in reality a frightened old man pushing buttons and pulling levers, to give the illusion of power. And this is a really wonderful image for the power of mindfulness, because with steady practice over time, we often find that mindfulness is like Toto. It becomes a faithful companion on our life's path. It helps us to notice what is present and, brings greater clarity to what's actually happening. And we can grow our mindfulness muscles, right? Developing the skill and the courage to open the curtains of aversion and delusion and reveal what I think there are many, many conditioned ways that we try to hide from feeling what's fearful, what's painful, what's vulnerable or insecure. And again, from Pema Chodron, she says to stay with that shakiness, to stay with a broken heart, with a rumbling stomach, with a feeling of hopelessness and wanting to get revenge. That is the path of true awakening. Sticking with that uncertainty, getting the knack of relaxing in the midst of chaos, learning not to panic. This is the spiritual path. And as Zen teacher Charlotte Joko Beck concisely stated, our job as humans who want to experience life fully is to pay attention when we experience something. So our practice really, it helps us to see that, our thoughts and feelings are really not as great and powerful as we might believe. Their power to control our quality of life, our reactions to life, our relationship with life, that power really only grows if we avoid looking behind the curtain, if we don't pay attention to our actual experience. And as we learn to be mindful of our thoughts, our feelings, we no longer fool ourselves by getting lost in them, right? And this is a kind of freedom. So just like Dorothy and her friends discover that they are more courageous, more loving and wise than they at first believed, together with our Sangha, we learn to face what's unpleasant and hard. We learn to trust in our own courage, wisdom, and basic goodness, not in spite of the hardship, not in spite of the mud and the meltdowns, but in welcoming them as an inevitable and intrinsic part of the wholeness of life. And so with that, my friends, we reach the end of our yellow brick road together. But Kathy has just a few words as we wrap up.
Yes, I just wanted to put a little, as we've mentioned, the class, Mindfulness in the Art of Imperfect Parenting will be starting up October 1. It's on Wednesday nights, 7:30 to 9, online only. And, it's a little bit different from what many other parenting classes have to offer in that, we're not working to improve ourselves as parents or change our children, but, really with embodied and intentional, compassionate awareness, try to embrace as best we can, this wholeness of our lives, our kids and our family lives. So, if any of you, if you or anyone might be interested in joining some fellow imperfect parents in exploring mindfulness and meditation practices and other practices, we would love to have you join us. Parents and caregivers of all ages are welcome, and no past experience with meditation is required. You can learn more and register on our website at zlmc.org/mindful-parenting-course. So thank you. And with that, we will, I guess, open up for any questions or comments that anyone might have.
Those online can just unmute yourself, or I can pass the mic here in the Buddha Hall. Sure, over here, Ken.
Wonderful talk, thank you guys. For me, my youngest is 26, so the mindfulness in parenting really comes for me from an understanding of impermanence. That the parent that I tried to be when they were younger and then found more difficult as they were getting older, I'm kind of just rejecting and going, now I'm the father of 3 young people in their 20s, and being able to break away from those identities that we set for ourselves as well as having society set for us has been really eye-opening. And so as I've been sort of bearing witness to you guys, bearing witness to your parenting, I've really appreciated it. So thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Beautifully said, Ken.
Over here, Gary.
Thanks to both of you for a wonderful talk. Kathy, a question for you. What if on that first day of picking up your daughter from nursery school, if that mom that helped you would have said, I would love to help you, but I'm running late, I gotta go.
Good question. I wonder what I would have done then. Um, well, what if? Um, it's always possible, but there are always more parents too to ask. I mean, it's interesting. I look back, looking back on these episodes when my children were younger, um, there are a lot of, I I made a lot of mistakes. There are a lot of times when I, you know, might have done something differently. Um, and I guess it's been really, I guess, rewarding as the more I've been practicing mindfulness and studying it. And as I said earlier, I mean, really the support of this Sangha has been enormously helpful with that. I, I can look back on that old me with just a lot more tenderness and compassion. And that even at the time, I wasn't able, even, days after I wasn't able to do. And um, so, yes, I guess if the parent didn't, couldn't have helped, I'm sure there would have been another parent who would have, or I would suspect there would have been. But thanks for the question.
Over here.
Yeah, it was a great talk. Karleen, this question is for you. You had mentioned early in your talk that about adoption. Talk a little bit more about that. I don't know if that's
Sure.
you adopting a child, and if so, if that was involved greater challenges or different challenges as a parent.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yes, my husband and I adopted both of our children from India. My husband is originally from India. Um, and in terms of, raising an adopted child versus your biological child, I don't know if I'm not able to really speak comparatively since both of our children are adopted. But what I hear from, the parents that I've met and the parents in our monthly group and in our classes, most of whom have biological children, the the struggles and the joys, and there's still just so much commonality. And I think though, having said that, um, we had to learn a lot about things like attachment. When you are adopting a child who has been separated from their birth parents from the time that they were born, it's our belief, and I think there's science to back this up as well, that it's a form of early life trauma that um, may not be conscious or expressible, but it's sort of carried, with a child. And so there certainly have been challenges for us with our kids in different ways, but how much of that is a direct result of being adopted, and how much of that is, just genetics, how much of that is environment and circumstance, very difficult to kind of suss that out. Um, yeah, yeah, but I would say that kind of the lens of Buddhist teachings, the impermanence, that things are not perfect, that things will be hard sometimes, all of that, and trying to kind of normalizing the fact that we all struggle, and to learn how to not be afraid of the judgment of yourself or other people. All of those things I think are just enormously beneficial when raising children of any background. So I don't know if that answered your question, but okay, thanks.
Yeah, up here, Adrian.
As the parent of an adult child, and we've spent time resetting our relationship, because now she, as most of you know, we live in a 2-flat and she lives upstairs. So we see each other every day in all kinds of moods, and we've had to learn a new kind of relating. And I find when reflecting back on that and on so much else, I find myself mentally saying the Gatha of Atonement at least once a day, which amazingly makes me feel better. I don't know how that works, but somehow embracing the responsibility kind of lets you go forward. But I do have a question, and it tangentially relates to what you're saying, which is, I was reading last night an essay by a woman who is a Buddhist practitioner. And she recounts how she was, there was domestic abuse and she was being stalked, and she had to actually leave the country for a while to get away from this person. And, and part of the essay was about embracing her new life, learning to live a new life. But at what point, like when meltdowns become dangerous, or you're in an abusive relationship, and so much of Buddhism is about embracing what you're experiencing, but where is that line? I don't know exactly what I'm asking, but that essay plus your very, very, profound teaching, both of you, brought that up to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a beautiful question. I think it kind of relates to what we speak about together with other parents in our groups, is about boundaries, right? About healthy and compassionate boundaries, and the idea is not, when we're compassionate, is not to just accept. It's not to be just okay with any kind of behavior, even if we understand where the origin is. If it somehow is putting you in a position of danger, or somehow how harmful to your well-being or the well-being of other members in your household, that there needs to be some kind of as best as possible, compassionate action. And sometimes that compassionate action is a fierce action. In self-compassion work with Kristen Neff, there's sort of the more nurturing, loving self-compassion that we talk about, and then there's fierce self-compassion. And I think when it comes to issues of safety and well-being, I think that sometimes we have to draw on that quality, that fierce quality, that's not aggressive to harm someone else, but it's strong and firm in order to protect, what needs to be protected. So Kathy, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think a lot of the way that we talk in our group and in the course, about boundaries, it's compassionate boundaries. We're practicing compassion as we're in relation to our children, and we're practicing compassion with ourselves. And as we do that, boundaries, I mean, with the practice of mindfulness, the more we practice, I think more comfortable that we become with, kind of discerning where those boundaries, where it's appropriate to draw those boundaries. It is a practice. And I like the word, Karleen, fierce. I mean, with all of these practices, you know, the practice of boundaries, or the practice of compassion, the practice of patience, we're practicing them with ourselves at the same time we're practicing them with others. And so really looking at the whole things in the most whole way that one can, as we're practicing, we're not necessarily, for me, in deciding where those boundaries are, thinking not just about this other person in that situation, but what's going to benefit the whole picture, which I think becomes more clear the more we practice.
Yeah, and I am cognizant of the time, but I did just want to bring one other point that came up as Kathy was talking, is this question also brings up for me, because one of the, the mental health koans that we're working with right now is addictions. And what I'm new to this realm of, of learning about it. But one of the things that's becoming clearer and clearer, that particularly in a parent-child relationship, there's a tendency to, but even I think maybe with partners or, significant others, like there can be sort of this feeling that one person has to take on the responsibility for the behavior and the actions of another, right? Because we care about them, because we love them, because we're trying to help them. And so part of the learning is that discernment, right? The wisdom of discernment, and being able to be calm enough and clear enough to be able to say a loving no. This is something that is your responsibility, and while I want to support you, I'm not going to fill in the blank, because I can see that if I do that, I'm actually not helping you in the long run, right? And this is something that is really your responsibility to learn how to do. And it's very difficult, very difficult. Seems almost counterinstinctive, as a parent, to sometimes refuse to help, or what is, kind of on the surface seems like help. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of bring that to light, just that idea of discernment. Yeah.
So I know we just have a minute or two left, but wanted to give our online Sangha an opportunity to chime in. If you're interested or able, just go ahead and unmute. Any other last thoughts here in the Buddha Hall as well?
Thank you so much, Karleen and Kathy, for a wonderful talk about courage, about discernment, about pausing, about being sane when things get difficult. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Roshi.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, everyone, thank you so much, Kathy and Karleen. Online Sangha, please enjoy. Have a lovely Sunday. Those of you who are here, please join us in the community room for kinship.